There was widespread speculation on Tuesday that the embattled acting chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, Ibrahim Magu, may have been suspended from office by President Muhammadu Buhari. This has come even as the travail of the acting executive chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, Mr. Magu, persisted yesterday as they, according to a report by Rise News sister Ralphie this day newspaper. The report goes on to say that the odds against Mr. Magu could have doubled, going by a comment of a top presidential official who said the ongoing investigation was a bold statement that nobody under Buhari's administration is above the law. Magu was flagged down on Monday in Abuja, trafficked by senior security agents and wigs to the presidential villa to appear before the presidential panel investigating allegations of corruption and corrupt practice leveled against him by the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, Mr. Abubakar Malami. SAN. So we talked about this yesterday. We called for caution. We said, oh, Magu's side should be heard. We said it might just be called for a chat. But it continued yesterday. So it's a marathon now. And there were stories coming out yesterday that the Villa has kept mum about as regards his suspension. I mean, a couple of dailies carried it yesterday. We can't really comment much about that because everybody's keeping mum as regards that. But what is really happening?
Well, we don't know. It's all speculation, isn't it? All we do know for sure is that the presidency has confirmed that there's an investigation underway. And as you were saying yesterday, it's for them to show that nobody is above the law and that if there's any allegation made against anybody, it will be investigated. To the extent that the only real metric for any office, even in the corporate world, anywhere, is performance. It is important that these allegations are investigated. It's a very bad sign if they are swept under the carpet. It has to be investigated. It's bad for public morale. It's bad for the government if corruption charges are laid against the anti-corruption czar. So that's what we know for definite. But as the talk of suspension, possibility of resignation, we're not sure yet.
Well, I mean, since yesterday we dealt with the basic principles surrounding the subject, but since then there have been other developments. The presidency is not keeping mum. The truth of the matter is that some newspapers have quoted Garuba Shehu as issuing a statement to the effect that what this demonstrates is that President Buhari has shown that nobody is above the law, that there are no sacred cows in his government. And that, of course, is consistent with the points we made on this program yesterday. Secondly, it has been confirmed that he has been detained for about 48 hours now. And that, again, is informed with, the usual process. If allegations are raised against you, the panel investigating the matter may then decide to keep you so that you can be readily available. The third point that is in the public domain is that panel, that Salami, Justice Hayo Salami panel, has been sitting for 3 weeks. So they've been looking at a number of issues, and then they got to a point on Monday where they had to invite Mr. Ibrahim Magu. And then the other point to note is that, look, this is like a staff being given a query. I made a point yesterday that the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice is the supervising minister of the EFCC. And if your staff is given a query, then he has an obligation to respond to the query. So in terms of process, all of this is perfectly in order. What we can insist upon is that there should be fairness, there should be justice. In terms of, how Mr. Magu is treated and how the investigation is carried out. Now, the other point to make, which is the latest development, is an essay I read yesterday evening by Michael Zekome, SAN, the Apava Gigibigi of Edo State.
I read that too.
Who wrote that as far back as 2017, had raised the same allegations against Ibrahim Magu, and that when the vice president, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, was acting as president, when the president was in the UK for medical reasons, he had raised the same allegations, and that he thinks that he has been vindicated. Well, I mean, Michael Zekome is a lawyer. He has had to represent many clients in cases against the EFCC. But he made one point there. He said that, look, in all of this, the travails of Ibrahim Magu, there's a lesson that everybody should learn, and that is about the ephemerality of power. Yeah. And that when you are in a position of authority or responsibility, you must exercise that responsibility with circumspection, with humility, with a lot of care. And I think that that's the lesson that everybody can take away from this. Government position is not a position you keep for life. It's a position that will end one day. But what we can then add, by way of footnote, is the fact that there's nobody who has occupied the position of the chairmanship of EFCC, the anti-corruption agency, that has not had one issue or the other. You will recall the experience of Mr. Nuhu Ribadu. You will recall the experience of Mrs. Farida Waziri. Yes. You will recall also that even Ibrahim Lamode, who was, a bit diplomatic in the discharge of his assignment, he also had his own issues, either with persons, with authorities. What it means, of course, is that fighting corruption in this country is a big challenge. And anybody who goes into that position should learn from the experience of others. We're told that Mr. Magu's residence has been searched and that, some of his aides have moved his things out already. But I think, for Mr. Magu himself, this should be an occasion for reflection. But we'll see how it plays out.
Mr. Zekame's piece talks about chickens coming home to roost. You and I were discussing this yesterday, the law of karma, in a totally unrelated topic during the break. Karma is a law. It's like gravity. Just what goes out comes back.
And quickly, in like 10 seconds, talk me through the uncertainty now going on at the EFCC. We even hear that some police officers are beginning to lobby for his position.
One newspaper reported that the most senior person next to him has been asked to take over. We've got to go on a break
now. Okay. I beg your pardon, gentlemen. That's all on the news headlines. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll have the trio of Rotus Odiri, Michael Wilson, and Aaron Akerejala to give us updates on Africa and global business and COVID-19. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Now joining us is Rotus Odiri to give us Africa Business Update. Good morning, Rotus. Over to you.
Good morning, Rotus. Good morning, Dr. Abati. Good morning, Tundun. Good morning, Rufai. So yes, for African news, we kick off with news that was pretty much expected by the market. The central bank has moved the official rates from 360 to 381 naira per dollar. We've talked about this already. I mean, the central bank governor did say that there was going to be an evolution of the rates towards unification. And if we take a look at this journey to unify, just a short chronology, we talked about this last week. The CBN moves the secondary market intervention sales rates where importers approach the CBN with their legitimate Form M and letters of credit. That rate was moved from 360 to 380. We talked about that already. There's the official rate has been moved from 360 to 381. The I&E window, which has already been trading after all this time in the 380 region, that closed yesterday at 386. And so you can see that everything is in line. Once again, the market has already expected this to happen because this has already been given as a forward guidance, if you will, from the central bank. What's the impact? Oil proceeds, this is for the official rate moving from 360 to 381. Oil proceeds in Naira will receive a boost. So when you think about the FAC allocations, Federal Account Allocation Committee, and the funds from oil sales that are shared between the federal government, the states, and the local governments, more will come in because, of course, now your dollar is getting more Naira. So that's a boost as far as inflows are concerned. And then, of course, the unification is needed to access the World Bank loan. So that's the latest development there. We move on to the African Development Bank. Yesterday, they provided a supplementary report to their economic forecast for the African continent. And if we take a look at the summary here, it's not very pretty. So the pre-COVID projection, this was back in January, was a 3.9% growth for the continent from the AFDB. Now, as of the revision, is a contraction of 1.7%. Now, this is, of course, as we know, the COVID-19 impact on tourism, on jobs, and so on and so forth. But that's the best case scenario. They're saying that in a worst case scenario, the contraction could be as much as 3.4%, which is almost double the 1.7% contraction. They do expect a recovery in 2021 to the tune of 3% growth. However, even with that 3% growth, they are saying that they're estimating a cumulative output loss of between $173 billion to $236 billion as far as what the continent is going to suffer. Resource-dependent countries, tourism-dependent countries, remittance-dependent countries. That is the story of the African continent, and what we could see with regards to the amount of damage being done in the view of the AFDB. They're not the only multilateral organization that has revised their projections. The IMF already revised their projections as well. The key thing there is that they said, look, a vaccine has to be produced at some point. We have to see that vaccine. If we don't, and we continue to see cases escalate, I mean, I'm sure Aaron, when he comes, is going to tell you about the president of Brazil testing positive for it. So, and a vaccine needs to happen in order for this slide to be arrested. If not, those projections could actually get worse. We move on to NIBS, the Nigeria Interbank Settlement System. They provided some stats with regards to e-bill payments. And I thought these numbers are very, very interesting. If we start first with the volume, take a look at this chart here. I've drawn some black arrows on the chart. Well, before I even get to those black arrows, if you look at the legend at the top right, it's a 4-year comparison. 2017 is in blue, 2018 is in red, 2019, is that beige? That's probably dark yellow. And then 2020 is in green. So the focus is really on 2020 this year with regards to the impact of the lockdowns and the COVID-19 pandemic on electronic bill payments. If you look at the black arrow in January, we were touching almost 125,000 payments. This again is volume, the number of payments that have been processed because NIBS, of course, supports the banking system for e-payments and so on and so forth. Then look at the drop. I mean, it drops in February to just over 75,000 payments. March, treading water, about 73, 72, and then look at that drop because, again, COVID-19 lockdowns happened towards the end of March, and you can see the impact to about 44,000 or so April and May. So that's a massive drop in the number of e-bill payments. What is being speculated is that the closure of schools probably had a lot to do with this. A lot of schools, it's understood, account for a large chunk of the volume of electronic bill payments that are made, but also in addition to school closures, you're looking at salary cuts, you're looking at people losing jobs, you're looking at people furloughed. All these have actually affected, because again, we're looking at payment of bills. If we switch off to, if we go to value, however, value has stayed high. So you're looking at least, we touched in March, over 100 billion naira worth of electronic bill payments. Why is that? Why did you see a spike in March? Probably people preparing for the lockdowns again with the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, different governors around the governors for each state announcing that lockdowns were imminent. It probably saw a spike in people wanting to make purchases of essentials or so on, or make payments of bills before it actually happened. And you can see the volume, the value rather, trailing off to just over 80 billion in April and in May. So we'll see how things pan out for the rest of the year with regards to electronic bill payments. Well, I will say, in a nation of 200 million people, about 39, 40 million bank accounts, to only have 122,000 e-bill payments suggests that we still have quite a bit ways to go with regards to proliferating it around the country. Finally, Engen Petroleum. This is very interesting. I saw this. They are a downstream petroleum player in South Africa. They released this video here, contactless payments for people buying fuel. So they released this in South Africa to tell people, you can see this gentleman, this lady is coming to buy fuel, they're wiping down, they're disinfecting everything, and he also gives them some sanitizer to wipe their hands, and then you look at the POS, he wipes down the POS, however, she doesn't touch it. They have an app. People in South Africa are supposed to be able to download the app, and then now she can pay for her fuel using a QR code. And so with that QR code, she doesn't have to touch the POS. Because look, POSs, you have to touch them with your fingers and you can spread the virus. So this is the petroleum company. They're using technology, again, for QR codes and contactless payment to be able to work so that people don't touch things. You have to have a good internet in place. You got to have a strong network. You got to have strong internet. We've had QR code businesses here in Nigeria, but there's been some network issues, and that is that's our African update.
I can imagine, Rotus. I just want to comment on that real quickly. It's shocking that Apple Pay till date has not worked in Nigeria. I don't know what is happening. And when you check your bank cards, I think a couple of bank cards now have provision for contactless payments in Nigeria.
Yes,
but they don't use it.
Right.
I don't get it.
It's the network issues. We still have to improve our network structure. South Africa still has a relatively stronger network than we do, so it's in some parts of like Lagos State, for example, here and there, but it's not uniform. It needs to be uniform, it needs to be stronger.
Well, thank you so much, Rotus.
Thank you.
And now for a global business update, we've been joined by Michael Wilson from London. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Good morning, everybody. Investing caution, really, today after that bullish start to the week, as far as rallies are concerned, a 5-day rally actually broke, but there was quite a hot streak in China stocks as well. I've got a little interesting snippet for you, actually, which is about the Hong Kong Stock Exchange itself. Shares in the Hong Kong Stock Exchange have risen 40%. That's a huge amount. The share price, rather, has risen 40% because Chinese companies, which have been made to feel unwelcome on Wall Street, have taken their business to Hong Kong's secondary market. So that shows you, in a sense, how important Hong Kong, as I've been saying, actually is to the Chinese economy. The dollar edged slightly higher as people moved out of riskier currencies like the Australian dollar. Gold was trading at an eight-year peak, actually, around $1,780 an ounce. Markets, though, expected to trade lower today. Just let me take you through where we've come from since we spoke yesterday. So there was a less volatile start in the United States. Tech stocks did extremely well. And then we had that Raphael Bostic. Do you remember him from yesterday? Head of the Atlanta Federal Reserve Bank, cautioning that the UK economy might rebound. That might be actually levelling off. And I told you about him and his warnings. And those kind of warnings resonated through trade yesterday. World Health Organization said it wouldn't be surprised if the death rate starts to rise again. Or it has, as COVID-19 cases and infections increased in June. So, not surprisingly, stock markets really yesterday lost ground. And also that bullish move I was talking about yesterday. Remember this article I was talking about in the China Securities Journal, which was in sort of encouraging a bullish turn in Chinese equities. And most of the population who do as they're told in China went off to buy. Well, that kind of fizzled out in lots of ways. And by the close of play yesterday, as far as the European markets are concerned, the FTSE DAC and the CAC, those major European markets were pretty unfizzled by all that. So 12:30 today, it's the big one for us. Summer statement from the Chancellor, Finance Minister Rishi Sunak, and he will be, and we're expecting a good jobs boost in one way or another for our struggling economy. Last week, the Prime Minister announced a £5 billion infrastructure plan. We expect that to be added to. They've got about an extra debt of maybe £3 billion. The housing sector could be in for a boost as stamp duty. That's a duty which is paid on if you pay more than £125,000 a house, then you get taxed on top of that. That ceiling might be raised to 500,000. There may be targeted, we call it VAT here, I suspect you do, but it's purchase tax basically. And that may be targeted, a reduction in that may be targeted towards some sectors, for example. Now, I think Rotus may have touched on this slightly, but let me give it to you again. The European Commission downgraded its outlook for the UK and the Eurozone. The fact that European countries reopened their economies at a slightly slower rate than they had before, that's very unsurprising. EC is now forecasting that the EU will contract by about 8.5% 5.3% in 2020, and that really echoes the views, bearish views of the IMF earlier on. UK and EU negotiators met in Downing Street yesterday, and we're not sure of the details of exactly what was discussed, but there will be a lot about trade and fishing rights and so on. The UK and the EU have both said that they actually want to strike a deal. And separately, Britain has said it would be happy it wouldn't be happy. It would do with being, as far as the European Union is concerned, enjoying the same kind of WTO, World Trade Organization rights that Australia has. Australia doesn't have a comprehensive agreement with the EU. It just has it has trade deals with the rest of the world under World Trade Organization rules. And finally, again, Rotus touched on this. Commodities, the EIA report comes out, International Energy Association report, agency be posted, and that will give us an idea of the amount of stocks and the drawdown that's happened in the United States. Stockpiles are felt to have fallen by 3.2 million barrels, which will have probably a positive effect on the oil price, but that'll be later on this afternoon. Back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. I just want to touch on stamp duty. It's not so much a question as an observation, a sad observation. While you're expecting in the UK this afternoon, Rishi Sunak, to raise the ceiling, like you said, from £125,000 to £500,000 to make things that much easier for buyers and just give a shot in the arm to the economy. In Nigeria, a few days ago, the FIRS, our Federal Inland Revenue Service, our tax people, announced that Nigerians are now to pay stamp duty for residential rentals, which ostensibly would give the agreement legal force, will make it binding on all the parties. Since when does stamp duty give any legal agreement binding force? I mean, at a time like this, at any time really, it's unacceptable, but especially not at a time like this when people are already groaning under the weight of so many COVID-19 shocks. Now we have to be paying stamp duties for rentals.
You do. I think it's a classic example of everybody's tax authorities. As soon as money starts to move, then they will get their hands on it one way or the other. I mean, it's life. It's what tax is all about. No government has enough tax, and they are always trying to seek ways to screw you even further for a bit more money. I'm afraid it's the way that our society and your society actually works. It's a shame. You're absolutely right. It would be better to just say, for a month, let's get rid of this, let's get the market going. But it has to be said, if that were to happen, it will only be a temporary windfall for people, and sooner or later everybody is going to have to pay for this pandemic in increased taxes wherever you live.
Well, quickly, Michael, I want you to comment further on Chancellor Sunak's $2 billion kickstart initiative, which is supposed to keep young people off the dole for a period. What's the mood in the UK, in Britain particularly? Is there a feeling of excitement, or people are like, oh, we've seen this before, it may not make much difference?
I think if you're a cynic like I am, you'll be doing the latter. We've seen it all before. I think that one of the things that is very, very difficult to judge, and we find it in the United States when those employment figures come out every week, and then the big ones every month, and it's the same with the UK. I guess it's the same with you as well. One's never really sure about who's actually working and who isn't, and who is actually actively pursuing a job and who isn't. So there's that. The second thing is that people are never really sure about what we would call the long-term unemployed, the people who are just out of work and have decided not to bother to try to look for work. The sad thing is that the rise of what we call NEETs, that people, these are youngsters who are neither in education or actually employment, so they're called NEETs. What actually compels them to get a job and so on? Apprenticeships, people are slightly sniffy about them. Universities are where people want to go. I think that's a great mistake. I think there are many jobs and many skills, great many skills, which are actually attained by apprenticeships, either i.e. doing a bit of theory and then learning for the majority of that on the job, electricians, plumbers, people whom we always need. I have a neighbour whose son is rejoicing in the fact that he's got an apprenticeship because he's going to be an electrician. And I've said to him, you will never be out of work.
And that's true. And you can say that I just hope we get to understand that in the Nigerian economy, because those people are needed so much. I want to talk about the dinner yesterday between Mr. Foster and Mr. Michel Barnier as regards EU talks. What was the dinner like? Was it the first, second, third, fourth course meal? Or was it hot pudding served to Britain?
I don't know the details of the dinner. What normally happens is that people like me, if I'd been there, which I'm not, would have been fed details of the menu and all that sort of boring stuff. But no, I think that they will have talked about fishing rights. I think they will have talked about level playing field. I think they will have reached the kind of situation which is difficult for people who don't take part in negotiations to get to, which is actually both sides would like to strike a deal. There's no point in walking away from this. It doesn't send, if they don't have a deal, it doesn't send the right message to the weaker members of the European Union who are looking at this, wondering where their economies are going to go when we break away, because obviously we supply them and we buy things from them as well. Trade is a multinational business, and I think if you believe in globalization, which I think most people do these days, and its better effects rather than its terrible ones, and there are some terrible ones,
Thank you, Mr.
then everybody
Wilson.
wants to strike a deal.
We've run out of time. Thank you so much. Now we're joined by Aaron Akerejala for an update on the COVID-19 pandemic.
Good morning. Good morning to you.
Morning, Aaron. Share the joke.
Aaron, why are you laughing?
Why are you laughing, Aaron?
I think it's Bolsonaro.
It's something offset. Well, good morning to you today. It's good to see you today. Good morning to Dr. Abati. Good morning, Rufai. How are you doing?
Good morning.
Let's get straight into the numbers today, looking at how things are playing out in terms of the numbers concerning COVID-19 around the world. And right now, from the data we always get from Johns Hopkins University, it stands at 11,830,885. That's the number of confirmed cases of COVID-19 at the moment. The World Health Organization have been firing warnings to countries around the world to be very cautious. As a matter of fact, there are talks that even though the number of deaths are flattening world over, the number of infections are still growing. 200,000 plus are being added every single day. And it's quite worrying, understanding that by this time, a lot of people were expecting for countries around the world to majorly be flattening the curve since reopenings have been happening left, right, and center. But that has not been the case. We've seen this thing go out there. But a quick update on something we spoke about yesterday, talking about the coronavirus and COVID-19 being airborne, and it can be transmitted through aerosols in the air. The World Health Organization have actually, like I said, they're always late to the party, have actually backtracked and said that they are looking at emerging evidences coming in right now, and that truly these things can, COVID-19 can be transmitted airborne. That is, particles could stay in the air, all right, fractions of particles could still stay in the air longer and could actually, people could actually pick this one up. They've spoken to people that they should prevent spaces that are actually, they could prevent spaces that are actually, they should actually prevent from going to different spaces that are closed, going to buses that are crowded. They should just maybe try to stay away from crowded areas. More importantly, as it stands right now, the World Health Organization are still insisting that they are still looking at evidences and trying to support this particular claim. And the organization that came out, remember, 239 scientists spoke about this, and they said that they are not trying to call out the World Health Organization, but they are trying to speak to them on several days, and they had several meetings, and they were very, very reluctant to declare that COVID-19 could be spread through aerosols in the air. And it's quite frightening, understanding that they're just facing their own conundrum, talking about the World Health Organization, with the US pulling out from the World Health Organization. They've started that particular process. Now, learning this, that things like this are coming your way and you have been probably reacting towards evidences that could save lives. Remember, this was the same road they actually took when it came to face masks also. They were one of the last people to actually put it out there and insist that wearing of face masks should be made compulsory. We're seeing these things happen, and it's a very, very big slip-up by the World Organization. Yes.
Aaron, sorry to interrupt you. Let's take a quick update, and then we'll come back to you. Domestic flights are due to resume today from the Murtala Mohammed Airport here in Lagos. For a first glimpse of how things are panning out in this direction, let's join our correspondent who is on ground there, Adefemi Akinsanya, who is right now watching the tarmac for a quick situation report, and we'll come back for more on the morning show. Aaron, we'll be back to you. Now we'll take Adefemi live from the Murtala Mohammed Airport in Lagos. Adefemi, good morning. Okay, we're still waiting for that connection.
Yeah. I mean, pretty much we'll see how things pan out. Since it's the first day, there's been a lot of promotional materials as regards this, and
we don't have that connection. Let's go back to Aaron.
Yeah.
Aaron, if you may just continue with the COVID-19 update. When Adefemi is ready at the airport, we'll go back to her.
So I'm just stating it there. People should be more careful because this, remember, this is a novel virus out there, and more importantly, everyone around the world, there are no experts in terms of COVID-19 at the moment, and we need to just be careful. Everyone's destiny is literally in their own hands. We've seen it play out. You were mentioning Rufai, you were mentioning Jair Bolsonaro. The news actually came out yesterday. He spoke and said that at the moment, when you look at how things have actually played out with him, after getting tested time and time again in recent past and almost dodging the bullet, this time around he said he has tested positive to COVID-19, although he has gone out to say that he's way better than he was previously because he was down with a fever, he was suffering tiredness, and Jair Bolsonaro right now, the president of Brazil, is saying that thanks to hydroxychloroquine, he's getting better. And critics have been hitting hard at the man. Remember hydroxychloroquine, which was once started as a miracle drug, the World Health Organization have tried to probably put a cap on it to say it is not as effective as possible. Probably even tomorrow we might talk about the study into the hydroxychloroquine. But at the moment he's saying that that is what has brought him this far. His sons have been speaking also and also claiming that this is also a victory for the father. Remember, he's following the line of President Donald Trump in the US, who also believes that hydroxychloroquine is the way out of COVID-19. And if you want to prevent it and if you want to actually cure it, hydroxychloroquine is that particular route at the moment. So it's still here and there. But before I actually come to you guys, or let me get to hear from you guys concerning this.
Bolsonaro is such a contrarian. Everybody goes left, he goes right.
Well, but I mean, the thing about Bolsonaro, he has consistently taken an anti-science stance. He's taken the test 4 times. Now he's tested positive for something he calls the little flu. Mm-hmm. And he has always argued that his past experience as an athlete will see him through. Well, we'll say that we wish him speedy and full recovery. But the question to ask is, will this change anything? Will Bolsonaro now coming down with the virus, will it result in a change of attitude on his part in terms of the policies that he promotes? 2 health ministers in Brazil have had to resign because the president was not cooperating with them. Brazil has confirmed cases of about 1.7 million, the second highest rate in the world after the United States. But there is also the speculation by his critics that is this a spin? Because there's a lot of mistrust, a lot of polarization in Brazil. And some people are saying, look, maybe the president is just doing this, declaring this, so that he can get public sympathy. But it looks like Adefemi Akinsanya is ready at the airport. Adefemi Akinsanya, are you with us now with the reports from the
I am. Good morning, Dr. Ruben. Good morning, Tundun.
Good morning. Over to you.
Hi, good morning to you, Dr. Ruben. Good morning to you, Tundun and Rufai. Hello. And of course to our viewers. We are here at the domestic terminal of Murtala Mohammed. I hope you can hear me. Hope you guys can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Fantastic. as you've said, at the domestic terminal of Murtala Mohammed Airport. We are in the section where passengers would have already checked in, would have already gone through security, and they come to this waiting area before they begin their journey onto the aircraft. This section specifically are for ARIC passengers aboard ARIC Airlines, and they will be traveling to Abuja, of course, to Nigeria's capital from here, the commercial capital here in Lagos. If you take a look here, you'll see lots of high visibility jackets behind me. Those people aren't necessarily travelers themselves, usually staff of the airport, any type of personnel, but where you have people who are not in high visibility jackets, those are more likely to be passengers, people who will be travelling aboard ARIC Airlines to Abuja from here in Lagos. You can see in this area, even though it is, I have to say, my first time in the domestic terminal, there are markings on the seats where people are advised to keep a social distance. The seat in the middle will always be unable for people to use, so that passengers would sit on the far ends of the chairs and, of course, maintain some type of social distance. And as you can see here, there's not a lot of chatter, not so much activity. People are very much sitting down and waiting for their turn to be allowed to board the aircraft. Just over this seat here, you can see that you have a personnel from ARIC Air getting ready to start the boarding process. As I said, this plane will be traveling a short distance from Lagos to Abuja, one of the earlier flights that will be commencing the reopening of Nigeria's airports for domestic travel. It's been a long time coming. Definitely Dr. Ruben and Tundun and Rufai, lots of people have been eager to be able to make their trips for whatever reasons, despite the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic here.
Well, Adefemi, how is the turnout? High volume or moderate?
Well, I've taken a little count of the people who are not in high visibility jackets here, and it's a moderate turnout. It looks like at the very least we have less than 20 passengers from the last time I've called. So that suggests that upon the flight itself, which obviously wouldn't be a high capacity flight, there is definitely going to be social distancing on board. We're hoping that not only will we be able to get access onto the tarmac, but we'd also be able to get access to the aircraft itself, so we can see for ourselves how passengers are maintaining a social distance. We've already heard that food and drink will not be served upon this flight in the interest of stopping any type of crossover from passengers and the personnel on board. So it'll be interesting to see what that process will be like for the passengers once they do get on board. But for now, as you can see, it's relatively dare I say empty for an airport here in Lagos, but we can obviously understand why. If you were to, as I said, expel the people in the high visibility jackets and look at people who are in plain clothes, those are more likely to be passengers.
And if I may, any idea how much they pay for their tickets? Do you have any idea?
Sorry, Tundun, if you could give me that again, I didn't.
Yeah, that announcement. Do you have any idea how much they paid for their tickets, the passengers?
I don't have an idea, but what I will do is ask a passenger if they would be so kind as to give me that information. Good morning, sir. Good morning, sir. I see you don't want to talk. No. Hi, good morning, sir. Hi there. My name is Adefemi. You're traveling to Abuja today on our ARIC Airlines. Good morning, sir. You're traveling to Abuja today? Yes. Could I ask you how much your ticket cost?
I paid online. It was my company that paid, but I know it's...
Figure.
I don't have any idea.
Okay.
I don't have any idea.
Have you been waiting a long time to board this flight? Is this an emergency journey that you have to make?
Yeah, the instruction is for us to arrive 3 hours ahead of time, which I did, and I've been here for over an hour now. My flight is for 11:30, so this is a sacrifice I have to pay, and I'm here for it.
All right, well, we wish you a very safe journey. So as it stands, Tundun, we've not been able to ask a passenger how much they've actually paid for their ticket. If we do go off air, I will be able to approach a bit more passengers, a bit more people, and hopefully get a bit more information. But as you heard that gentleman here, he said that he'd already paid for his ticket. He wasn't able to disclose the amount he paid for it, but said that he was told to get to the airport more than 3 hours before his departure time. His flight is expected to leave at 11:30, and he has been here well within that 3-hour period. So as I said, it is going to be a lengthy waiting time for the people before they board their flight to Abuja.
Well, thank you very much, Adefemi, and thank you for the excellent work you are doing.
As always.
Just keep saying.